Welcome back to Oneself. My name is Stephen Maher. With me today, with me always, is Adam Bartleman. Adam, thanks so much for joining me today, my friend. Folks, in the continued pursuit of a listener a couple weeks ago said that they wanted to know more about us, right? Like, more about our backstory. They really appreciate the things that we were discussing and talking about, but they wanted to learn more about us as people. That was episode 39. Allow us to reintroduce ourselves. So, in that pursuit, we're gonna kind of switch things up a little bit for this week and dive into more of that and just give context for why we've come to the conclusions we have about life, the world, humanity, the things that we're seeing. Like I said before, Adam and I call each other's keen observers of life, and we're noticing these things and they don't make any sense. In that pursuit, I'm gonna ask Adam a question because Adam, in my experience, brother, like I think when things uh, here's my question for you, because you said you started to notice things didn't add up when you were like a young child, right?
Mm,
And for me, like, I kind of felt that more when I was, like, older, like, I'd say, like, 16 or 17, 18, when I was, like, because I was getting Catholicism shoved down my throat my whole
mm,
life, and, like, something never sat right with me, but I never, like, truly questioned it until I was, like, like, well into my teens, and, so that was the first, like, step of, deprogramming, and then went away from religion for like 10 years, but then came back and found spirituality and the greater belief in something, that we are a part of something greater, and that a large part of humanity doesn't understand that. And again, don't trust anyone who has all the answers, right?
yeah,
Who claims that they have all the answers. Once again, we certainly do not. But we do know that something's wrong, right? Like things aren't adding up. There's not a logic to a lot of what humanity does. There's a lot of short sightedness, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of greed. Um, so to kick things off, Adam, when did you start to notice that things just didn't really make sense?
yeah. That's a good question. I mean, I think just to add to the start is like everybody goes through that journey at some point of recognizing that things are just. It's not that they're wrong because what is right and wrong. Those are kind of um, moral judgments that we make up. There's nothing really right or wrong with anything. Everything just is as it is. But it's kind of like noticing that things are not in as much of alignment as they could be to contribute to and support human the human experience in like happiness and the alleviation of suffering. So yeah, I mean, it started for me, yeah, pretty young. I think I can't remember if I told the story before, but having some paranormal experiences when I was a kid, that was I did relate that early on, but also, yeah, I was just waking up from sleep, and remembering dreams. It was like first thing in the morning as a kid, remembering the dreams that I was having the night before, and then laying there and thinking, well, what if this is a dream too that we wake up from at some point? And that's when if things were going kind of not going so well at home around that time when I was like, 5, 6 years old. And and that's when it started to really kind of shift and just kind of seem off. And that was right around the time when then I was medicated as a kid. So, my parents took me to
Noticing too
uh,
much, huh?
yeah, yeah. So at 7 actually they started giving me like SSRIs, antidepressants, because yeah, I mean things were feeling off, and that was expressing through me, and in that way, it was coming out like being very depressed, lethargic, OCD, and and those are kind of different ends of the spectrum, but that's how I was expressing, and yeah, that's how it started, but then it kind of tapered off after that, and I think in large part because of the medication. It was just like I just got numbed out after that. But that experience in and of itself, even though it was ongoing for years, that was also a part of it. Was like, why do I need to take medication just because things are not things are because things are not going well at home. It's like this. There's a reason for this. It's not this this story that I was told at the time. Like you have a chemical imbalance. You know the '90s script for pushing psychiatric drugs. You were born with a chemical imbalance. It's like, well, no, it's not that simple. But that was a big part of it, though. That kind of narrative I was given because I just thought it was bullshit, but I didn't really have a choice at the time because I
Yeah,
was
man, you were a
yeah
young boy. Like that's
yeah
that's kind of that's kind of crazy, bro.
yeah. It was a formative experience, that's for sure.
You said you were numbed out, right? And then how long would you say that you went through that numbing out? And then because people say, right, like when children come into this world, like they're closer to the veil, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah
beyond. Young children are a little bit more in touch with that spirituality because they're so close to where we come from, right?
yeah
Which and then towards the end of your life too, when people are passing into death, like it's like the veil is kind of collapsing as well. Like if they're in hospice or whatever, like talk to a hospice nurse. They have stories, I'm sure, right?
yeah
When you're on the other side of that, right? The beginning and the end of life. So yeah, man, it sounds like you were kind of like still accessing that a little bit as a child, where it's just like stuff isn't adding up. And then, had the numbing out with the medication. And then when do you
yeah
think that the noticing started up again in your life?
yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I just want to speak to that the veil being a little bit thinner there at the start and end of life, because that was very much my experience. Was like, having paranormal experiences, like seeing things in my house that didn't make any sense. So that felt like it was it was
Yeah.
very close to whatever another side is. But yeah, the
Do you want to
numbing
tell
out.
people that really quick? I know, just because anyone listening, I'm sure that would be. I
Yeah,
know, I know the story, but like, just yeah,
yeah.
it was a good story.
Yeah, the one instance, like I was reading in bed when I was 6 and, lights on, fully awake, and the blankets on my bed just got yanked off, like fairly forcefully onto the floor. And I was just like, didn't make any sense. I was just like, what? But I wasn't very scared in that instance because the door to my room was open. My mom was like folding laundry in the hallway. Like she was, like, right there. Lights were on. It was, like, just bizarre. It was alarming, but it was, like, kinda not that big of a deal. Um, and then another time, the one that was a little scarier was, like, middle of the night, waking up to see my bedroom door swinging open and shut, like, very forcefully, very rapidly, and for a long time. And just sitting there and watching it, trying to make sense of it, and not being able to. And yeah,
Yeah.
just quick
So it wasn't like
synopsis
the
of it.
door was closed, like it was opened and closed like repeatedly, back and forth with
Yeah,
no one
yeah,
doing it.
yeah. No, like swinging open and shut really, really fast. And the most disturbing part of it was really like how long it went on for. It was just like, you know, really the full door moving like that quickly. Like if a grown person were to be moving the door in that way, like it would be taking a, even though it's just a light interior door, it would be taking like a decent amount of energy to be doing that because it was moving so quickly and so for so long. And yeah, that continued for a while. Like it would stop. I'd gather the courage to run through the door and try and get my parents to help me, and then they wouldn't, and I'd go back and wait for a little while, like, hide my head under the covers, look again, they'd be doing it again. And like that happened 3 times in that one night. And yeah, anyway, so that was part of it. But those were the two like main ones. Anyway, yeah, so the medication came, was very numbed out. And then I think starting to uh, go in the direction of relieving the numbing was like getting like substances. Like for me it was um I guess interestingly, I mean, I didn't really think about it this way, but I kind of went deeper into it because I started drinking alcohol when I was 14. And that was like more numbing, but it was like in an attempt to feel something, you know because
Yeah.
I hadn't really been feeling anything for so long. And then, alcohol came along, and it was like it felt like I was feeling something, you know, it it gave the illusion of feeling something because, you know, lowered inhibitions, like, I felt like I was kind of it brought me into a feeling of presence for, you know, maybe the first time in a very long time. So then that kicked off the journey of, alcohol abuse, which, uh went on for another 15 years because I think I quit drinking when I was 20. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I quit drinking when I was 30, so a little longer than that. Um, but yeah, that was how it started off, and getting back to noticing and feeling things was like that was, yeah, around when I was quitting drinking, and when I decided to quit taking the medication, which I had been told by, you know, my doctor that I had to take for my entire life.
Yeah,
And,
man, so almost 24 years until you were,
uh,
like, sober.
yeah, yeah, so I took the medication the medication I stopped taking when I was 28, so that was 21 years of taking the medication, and it was actually this was interesting, I thought anyway, but, I turned 28 and something snapped. I was just like, "No, like, I'm not taking this medication anymore." Like, it just doesn't make sense. And, so I slowly started weaning myself off of it for, like, 4 or 5 months until I was taking nothing. Like, I just took like, gradually lowered the dose. Not saying, like, not recommending that people do that with other doctor supervision, just like, I that's what I chose to do, and it worked. Like, I tried to do that earlier in life, and it wasn't so good. It was a little scary, but at that point, you know, I got off of it, and once I was off the antidepressants that I'd been on since I was 7 years old, I didn't notice any difference, so, like, which was a good thing because, you know, I was told, like, my depression would get worse, my whatever, you know, all these things I was told I had, and, nothing got worse. It just kinda leveled out, and, the only thing that changed was I all of a sudden didn't want to drink alcohol so much. So it was really interesting, like, dropping the medication was, like, dropped the alcohol addiction too. Like, all of a sudden I was, you know, going out with the guys from work and just having like 3 beers instead of 10 or 15 or 20 beers. And,
Yeah,
it was just like something shifted where I was like, "You know what? I would rather be able to get up tomorrow morning and, like, you know, go for a hike or go to the gym than have to sleep off a hangover." Like, and that it just like 1 week to the next, it shifted that quickly where it just made so much sense, and it made absolutely no sense to drink anymore, and it made so much sense to cut it down. I didn't even have to think about it. You know, like, when I eventually quit drinking, people would ask, you know, like, think it was like a really severe addiction kinda thing, like an AA kinda situation, and, you know, people would ask, like, "Oh, is it okay if I have a beer around you? Like, does it bother you?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not." Like, I definitely was a problem drinker, but it was years ago. By the time I was quitting, it was just like it didn't take some huge force of will. It was just like the most obvious thing in the world. It was just like, I'm just gonna put this down now, and that came as a result, I believe, or at least in connection to, dropping the medication. So that was the first part of it, was, like, getting off the meds, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, "I don't want this other numbing experience of, like, you know, drinking alcohol," which is obviously is a nervous system depressant. So I, yeah, I dropped that, and it was like that's when the light started to finally kinda peek through, you know what I mean?
yeah, brother. And you mentioned, like, hiking and, going active as you're dropping these substances, right? And when
Yeah.
we met, right, like, at first time I saw you, I don't think we formally met at that time, but, like, the first time I saw you was at the gym,
Mm.
right? And, you were in shape then, and so, like, when do you think, like, working out, like, was that always a part of the journey even during the antidepressants and the substance abuse, or,
Yeah.
was that really started to work into your life later on?
You know, it that actually came just when I decided to be a firefighter, because yeah,
Work hard,
interestingly
play
enough,
hard.
I yeah, yeah, well, yeah, kinda, like, I didn't really care. Like, I remember being in high school, and a bunch of the guys that I was friends with were, like, hitting that age where, grade 10, 11, 12, like where they were all getting super interested in working out and everybody was lifting weights and trying to get big and taking supplements and stuff. And I remember I just didn't care. I remember it like at the time I was like, I just wasn't into it. I was tall and really, really skinny, and I just didn't care. I was like, yeah, I didn't see the point. I was like, I was, athletic enough. I'm like, I like all the reasons boys come up with, right? I'm like, I was athletic enough. I held my own in fights, like, on the weekends whenever they happened. And I had a girlfriend. I was like, what do I need to get all big and jacked for? Like you guys, like I just didn't care. But um it was when I decided to be a firefighter, I was like, "Oh, maybe I should put on some a little strength," because I was still I mean, I decided to be a firefighter. I went to fire academy, like, right when I turned 20, like, I was still pretty skinny guy, so, I got into working out then, and then I was on that journey while being a really big drinker, which, those things don't really go together, but, I I made it work. I was, into fitness, boxing, while being a pretty decent, yeah, pretty serious alcoholic.
Well, I don't know
And,
if you resonate with this, but, like, when I was in college, the binge drinking or whatever, like, on the weekend, I could never do this now, you know? Like, this is
yeah,
when, 18, 19, 20, but, like, like, party hard the night before, and then I would sweat it out in the gym the next morning, and then I would
mm,
feel better, right? So it's like I would sweat the hangover out by just doing, like, a really hard workout, and then I would feel better, and that kinda, like, perpetuated it because it was like I didn't, like, it wasn't like I was hungover the whole day, like, I just really went through the suck, like, at the beginning, the crack of dawn at the gym, and then I was
yeah,
like, "Oh, like, I sweated it out, like, I feel good, the endorphins from working out, I go get a meal and I'm, off and running," and then repeat the pattern.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you was that some kinda similar?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I remember being like, yeah, up until, like, kind of mid, late 20s, that was, like, totally a thing. I could be, um yeah, mid-20s, I would say. I could still do that. I could still, like, uh, drink a lot and then go and work out and be, probably, like, you know, 80, 90% as good as I would have been had I been sober the day before. And then later on, it started to get kinda worse where it was like, man, the hangovers, like, by the time I was, 27, 28 were definitely worse. But, yeah, man, it was one of those things where I would just. Yeah, and interestingly too, like, something that I've noticed, I think, is, like, that's part of some sort of, like, some masculine programming, some toxic masculine programming, like, we're gonna drink, but then we're gonna, like, you can't show any weakness, like, you gotta be in the gym the next day. I know I got that from my dad, like, not the gym part, but, like, if you do get drunk and you're really hungover and stuff, you cannot show that you're hungover the next day. Like, when I was just random story, when I was 15 years old, and, like, that's really young, but I was 15 years old at my aunt's wedding, and I got absolutely wasted. I had one of my uncles was just, like, feeding me drinks because he thought it was funny, I guess, and then, another uncle later was, like, getting drinks with me, and I was, like, shit-faced 15-year-old kid at this wedding, like, super wasted, and, and then, whatever, slept it off, and then the next morning was, like, to the point where, there are those times when we drink hard and, like, you're 18 or you're 20 and you can get up, like, and, go to the gym. But there were those certain instances where it went so far that it was like, past even that, where it was like, even though I was young, I still had, like, such a savage hangover, I could barely move the next day. Like, that's how much alcohol I drank. And,
Yeah.
in that case, it was like I was really not well the next day. I was, like, really dragging my ass, uh, having to drag my ass out of bed and, like, but I knew, and I don't think I'd ever even been told this explicitly, but I knew that that I couldn't show it. I couldn't show the weakness. I had to get up and I had to pretend that I was fine. And I did, and I remember, like, I got some praise from my dad for that because he knew how wasted I was, but I didn't show that I was, and everybody, in the family and stuff, as it goes, the next day, "Oh, how you feeling, bud? How you feeling?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Fine, fine, absolutely fine." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And I
Yeah.
was, like, getting positive feedback for that because it was like, had I been hungover, I think they would have torn me apart, over it. But the fact that I was, like, keeping it together, it was like, "Okay, we'll excuse the fact that you were drunk, and never mind the fact that, like, no one was looking at the fact, like, why was this child drunk?" You know? Who was giving all the
Yeah.
alcohol to this, like, young boy? Um,
Yeah, bro.
but,
Not to mention the fact that that's where you get the positive reinforcement on your behavior
yeah,
as well. Like, it's like, oh, like
yeah,
you know, as if yeah, again, as a 15-year-old, like you're getting fucked up, and it's like, oh, good job not showing the hangover. Like, we're proud of you.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah, right?
you know? Yeah.
That was exactly it. And, I've noticed that with men, throughout life, it's like, going out drinking the night before work, but like still showing up for work and like not showing it, that kind of thing. It's like, man, this is this is not good behavior. But yeah, that I forget where we were going before that. That story just popped
No,
in.
we were just talking about fitness, dog. Like, you know, like
Yeah,
you know, the journey with fitness and, you know, and yeah, yeah, just the work hard, play hard kinda, right? Like into your 20s. But then you're right, like, you know, when you
yeah,
get older and those hangovers, like, it's just you're not 18 anymore. So it's like that shit really rocks you.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And yeah, man, the definitely the work hard, play hard thing though. It was like, and I think it brought some sort of balance. I mean, that there had to be, like you said, the endorphins, the hormonal boost that like the alcohol had depressed. I think that working out was through those hard drinking years was a saving grace because without it, it might have just been like more of a spiral. I
Yeah.
kind of I used to look at it like everything else in my life was like very healthy. I ate really well. I exercised, and I was like, okay, so I just have my one vice. I drink a lot, and I was like, yeah, that's okay. That's balance. And I changed my perspective on that later, but at the time, that's how I thought. I was like, yeah, it's fine. I I just have the one vice. I drink a lot, and but man, that's a destructive one because it's like so toxic to every single part, every cell of your body. It's super toxic for us. So I was grateful
Yeah.
to leave that behind, and it's been like 8 years now. Like, which again wasn't this thing like, oh, like I'm counting the days, the months, and the days. Like, this is how long I've been sober. It wasn't like this battle that had to happen to get over it. As I said, it wasn't some big force of will. It was just like one day to the next. Actually, I remember when I quit drinking, it wasn't even planned at all. I was out celebrating 2 of my really good friends getting hired onto the fire department, and we were just out for, like a celebratory drink at a neighborhood bar, and I remember I had 2 pints of Guinness, and I was, like, just finishing my 2nd one, and I just put it down, and I was like I just looked at it, I was like, "Huh, would you look at that? That was the last drink I'll ever have," and I just knew it, and I just was very deeply aware that I was done with it. I was like, "Oh, interesting." No, like, I didn't really say anything, I didn't tell anybody, I was just like, "Yeah, that's the last drink," and, and, yeah, and then I think that's when the awareness really started to shift, and that's when things started to get really interesting, talking about, like, when do you start to notice the misalignment because I've heard, like, awakening described in such a way where it's like you quit like, waking up, and of course, there are many levels of this, and, we're not claiming to be, like, awake or self-realized or anything, but for those who are listening and for those who know, like, what we're talking about when you start to notice, like, the script that everyone's following in this world, like, how it doesn't really make a lot of sense and how our world is not really set up uh, for everyone to be happy and at peace and satisfied with themselves. But it's kind of like I heard this analogy that it's kind of like quitting drinking, but you have to live the rest of your life in a bar where everyone's drunk and carrying on and behaving ridiculously. And
Wow, that's
so like
great. I've
literally
never heard that. I like that.
yeah, so it's like literally and figuratively because waking up is kinda like that where you're, like, out in the world and everyone's still behaving in these weird, kind of scripted ways, and you're noticing it, and then also, like, literally being surrounded by people who are still drinking a lot and being in those spaces sober and but that was a part of it though. It was like once I stopped drinking, I started to just notice how when I was around my friends that were still drinking, I was like, man, these they have the same conversation every time they're drinking. Like, and I was like, so yeah, that's exactly how I used to be. It's just talk about the same shit every time, and then you just start to notice the patterns, and once you start to notice the patterns, if you follow that thread, at least in my experience and like the way I see it, you start to see the patterns everywhere and recognize that like you just zooming out from them and becoming detached from the patterns deepens the awareness in such a way because we're like noticing it, but still uh, looking through the lens through which you would notice those things. Like, and what I mean by that is like we're experiencing the world through our egos, and the ego, it's like the human mind is really just like a pattern recognition system. We start to recognize patterns and like, okay, this type of thing usually leads to a good outcome. And like when these sort of, when these sort of, things come up in our environment, these sort of stimuli or conditions, like it's going to lead to a bad outcome. So I'm going to avoid these things, right? Like we're just like a pattern recognition system. So once I started to, just kind of zoom out and notice the greater patterns, it was like, man, we every time the boys are drinking, they're talking about the same shit. And I was like, and again, including myself in that, I used to be talking about the same shit all the time. And then I just noticed like, okay, yeah, even when I go to work, everybody's is talking about the same shit. It's like, different week, same conversation. And everywhere, family get-togethers, like everywhere, I'm just everyone's talking about the same things. Everyone's projecting their egos. Everyone's projecting essentially like, and it's usually negative. We're projecting things that are like unhealed traumas within ourselves, like things that we disagree with. And I was like, man, this is just like really boring. And and it kind of went along with the as I said, quitting drinking. It was just like this is just so obviously not something that I want to be a part of anymore. And yeah, that was an early kind of recognition of like this life we're living in this regular way, this regular North American, follow the script, go to school, get the job, like get married and have kids, like is not necessarily it. Like it can be for some people, but it's not necessarily all there is to it. And I think that this pattern that we're all stuck in is like really just kind of a loop, and it's like not getting us anywhere. Again, we're just going in circles, and maybe that's why we keep having the same problems generation after generation. And generational trauma, again, micro macro, looking at the micro expression in like the individual person in the individual family. It's like why do these behaviors keep expressing? Why does like alcoholism, drug addiction, violence, why do these carry on through certain families? It's like because there's something there. Like there's something there that's not being coming to a resolution. So it's just passing down through the generations until it comes um, back into balance, I suppose. But that was a part of it, man. That was the start of it, anyway. And from one way of looking at it,
Speaking about patterns, right? What do you think the patterns that you're breaking when you see your lineage, when you see your pedigree,
yeah,
and looking at yourself, right? Because
yeah,
bro, like I've seen, people die, right? Perpetuating this shit. It's like
yeah,
having nothing has ever changed, right? I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it in other people's families, and so, first of all, kudos to you for breaking that pattern, right? People talk about that, like changing it up. So like what do you think that you've obviously you talk about alcoholism, and
yeah.
so that's one of them. But anything else you've noticed of just like hopefully rectifying within your lineage?
Yeah, well, I mean, the huge one, like you said, is alcoholism, and I think that's tied to. I mean, the addictions are all, you can look at them
Trauma.
specifically. Yeah, because it's like you said, early death and that kind of stuff. Like that was an expression in my family too. Um, the addictions, you could talk about what the different substances that people are addicted to, and I look at those substances as like, why does that specific substance carry on down through a family? And it's like, I think it's just it happens to be the perfect substance for numbing that specific brand of pain that's come down through that family. So you see, it is often alcohol, but there are other substances that get abused pretty consistently through families. But yeah, connected to that is like the biggest one for me is like victimhood. Is feeling like a victim, like something like seeing the world through that negative, like defensive kind of lens, thinking that things are happening to me, thinking that I've been a victim, when I recognize now that that's simply not the case. And that to me is attached to alcoholism, because that's what is alcohol? It's like it's a substance to numb pain. And where's the pain coming from? Pain's coming from this idea which is really connected to an identity, like a concept of an identity that is being held on to, which is like, yeah, I'm hard done by, like shit hasn't gone well for me. This is how it goes. This is just how life is, because that's all that's been modeled to me. That's all that I've seen from my family, and then the people close to us. It's like, birds of a feather flock together, right? So uh, when that sample of life has been expressing a similar way of coping with the world, and a similar worldview, it can lead to, that really being pretty well entrenched in someone's consciousness. So I think that's one that the biggest one is like victimhood. And yeah, I mean, still working on that. Still working on that. Being a more positive person every day, and like not falling into those negative thought patterns that have been there since childhood. Which obviously then it's like, where did I learn those things? I learned those things from my parents. And so yeah, I think that's the biggest one, is like addictions, and then but that's also attached to the victimhood kind of narrative. Um, but yeah, like more minutely speaking, uh yeah, that the way that it expresses, I suppose, which is, feeling down, feeling depressed, being reactive, being angry, having anger problems. Those are all kind of things that I have been breaking, that have come from my family.
Yeah, brother. I first of all, yeah, like, kudos to you for working on those things, recognizing those things, accountability, right? The man in the mirror.
Yeah, accountability
Which
for
kind of I
sure.
was gonna lead to my next thing, which was what do you still struggle with? You touched on it a little bit, but obviously growth is a lifelong pursuit, right? Always trying
Yeah,
to discover who we were meant to be. So, I mean, I got things I struggle with, still,
yeah,
right? In this process of, yeah, awakening, noticing, and so I was just, what do you think? Like, what do you
yeah,
still, what's lately look like?
yeah. Yeah, man, it's like it's lately is great. It's amazing. But still working on always seeing looking on the bright side. Always focusing on the positive, like not falling back into the pattern of like taking stock of everything that's not going right, because that is there's a belief that's still providing a sense of safety, or some level of safety by noticing what's wrong, because that was the pattern before. It's like, try and notice what's wrong to in order to avoid it, but then we don't realize like that's an immature worldview, because if we're noticing it, then we're just recreating it in our reality. So actually we have to wrest the energy away from that, and bring it to a place of ignoring the negative, to a reasonable degree, of course, and focusing more on the positive, because of course sometimes it pays to notice the negative or the dangerous stuff, if it's gonna lead to keeping us safe. But in reality, like, we live in a very peaceful part of the world, And there's no need to be that focused on the negative all the time because it is overwhelmingly positive actually, but we've just been conditioned to see it so negatively. So, um, yeah, that's still the ongoing journey is like, being an even more positive and upbeat person because it was a long time being of the other persuasion.
I told you, yeah, folks, I'm dealing with kind of a situation in my neighborhood right now, and and so I was telling Adam that before, just catching up before the week, and so I was just like, this situation sucks, or it's just, but then I was like, talking with my partner, and I was just like, well, what am I grateful for? It was like number one that like
Yeah.
it's her and I versus the problem. Like I'm not letting this outside influence like come in between me and her. Right? It's like we're a united front against the external thing, which I was like, I'm really
Mhm.
proud of that. Like the gratitude in the shit, right?
Yeah.
Like and yeah, but that's something like yeah, I'm continually trying to work on. I really resonate heavy with that.
Yeah, and it's like it's cool, right? Because it's that's like to sum it up really, really, really well is just focusing on gratitude. Like no matter what is going on, like what are we grateful for in the situation is such an easy way to switch it, to
Yeah.
switch our awareness back to the positive. But then also, keeping in mind to be patient with ourselves and like even if we catch ourselves slipping like that, we're still focusing on the positive. Like, okay, maybe I got reactive in that moment, maybe I get a little angry, but I noticed that my overall trend lately has been positive. So I'm going to focus on that because that will actually be the quickest way of not falling back into a negative pattern. When another triggering stimulus comes along, because we can fixate on, or at least I can fixate on like when I make a mistake rather than like the overwhelming positive that was expressing before that. But it's easy in the moment. Sorry, it's not so easy in the moment. Like it's easy for me. Like you're telling me that story, and I'm like, okay, so the person who's giving you a hard time, like just find compassion and like, try and look from their perspective and see that they're hurting and like see that it's not personal. So like don't take it personally. It's like it's really easy to say that from the outside perspective but like if I'm in your position, like yeah, I might be getting a little reactive too, because it's like that's when the walls kind of close in and like we kind of get into that tunnel vision and like that kind of trauma response
Yeah.
where it's like this is triggering something deeper, like when I've been like unjustly accused of something or blamed when I was a little kid and it felt like the world was ending. It's like that's making this feeling come up. So it's really easy to sit back and like armchair quarterback the whole situation,
Yeah.
but
Just be
really it's like
grateful. Yeah, no, no. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
to be honest and transparent, dog. Like throughout the course of the day, like it was just the whole spectrum of emotions. Like I was angry, I
yeah,
was annoyed, I was pissed off, but it's just
yeah,
like what I didn't do was like I felt those emotions and I didn't do anything rash when I was in that head state, that headspace.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's not like yeah, which would have made the situation worse, our circumstances worse. Right. So it's just like, I'm not like saying I did not feel those things. I 100% did,
yeah,
but what I didn't do was let it make an annoying situation even worse. And then yeah, the eventual conclusion was gratitude for how we handled the situation.
yeah, man.
And even though we both felt the full spectrum of emotions where it's just like that's just how the situation yeah brought stuff up in us, right? And
Yeah.
it's all good. It's all good, from on the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge that stuff within yourself. And then it's also, commendable to acknowledge it publicly because we can get caught in these traps of like, kind of toxic new age spirituality where you're not supposed to be negative at all. And it's like, that's not the experience. That's not the truth of our experience. We're here to experience polarity. So it's like, if you are experiencing negative emotions, don't push them away and scold yourself for having them and pretend that they're not there. You have to sit with them. That's actually the healthiest way of dealing with it. Because when you scold yourself and push it away. Like, what are you doing? You're pushing it into the shadow. You're not acknowledging that part of you. And then what do we know happens then? It's going to express in a different way. It's, playing whack-a-mole here. It's going to come up somewhere else, and it's going to express in an unconscious and like toxic way. So it's like the most, loving thing to do, I believe, is to sit with those emotions, to accept yourself, and to 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 allow the anger, to allow the frustration, but to really sit with them, to sit, like literally go sit in silence and just feel the feelings instead of projecting them outwardly or trying to numb out, and like, it can be a little more difficult to detect, a little more nuanced later on in the journey, when it's like, yeah, I'm not going to, grab a beer when I'm feeling frustrated. Like, I've long ago recognized that that's not a good way of dealing with things. But still, somebody might reach for something sugary. Somebody might like jump onto their phone and start scrolling as their way of self-soothing. And it's like, I always think it's good to be aware of those things too. It's like, don't allow those things to creep in. Literally, like, something's pissing you off, go sit down in a quiet room with no distractions, no phone, and sit with the part of yourself that is angry, and breathe through it and just let it go, because that's the quickest way through. So so acknowledging it within yourself, and then, sharing your story publicly. That's great, because, people are out here trying to look like these, perfect, spiritual beings that don't get angry. And it's like, that's not the reality of the experience. So let's not pretend that it is. Let's own ourselves and own our experience, so that we can actually move through it and evolve in a healthy way. So that's cool, man, because yeah, not easy when we're in it. It's like easy for me to sit here and like offer you like commentary or, advice on it when I'm not in it. But when somebody's doing it to me, I might not be
Yeah.
so zen about it, so that's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my focus now is, like, just, like, the rebound, right? Where it's like, okay, like, I was pissed off. It's like, how quickly can I get back to Zen, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's been an effort in multiple areas of my life where, if I feel my whatever rising, my anxiety, fears, anger, whatever, it's like, okay, like, let those things feel. How quickly
Hmm.
can I bounce back to Zen? You know what I mean? And so that's been an
Yeah,
interesting thing, because yesterday it kind of took me all day, dude. Like, I was kind of pissed off the entire morning about the
yeah,
situation. And, but by the nighttime I was like back to Zen and cracking jokes about it.
yeah,
And so, more difficult situations takes me longer to get back to Zen, you
yeah,
know? But, with smaller things, it's like the bounce back the duration is quicker, right? So
yeah,
that's been I don't know if you resonate with that, but the rebound has
yeah.
been very top of mind for me lately.
Totally. Well, that gap just it gets smaller and smaller from when you get like pulled in. When you get pulled into the illusion, you start to think, "Oh, this is a really big deal." But then you come out of it. Like, maybe like a year ago, you would have stayed pissed off for like a week, but it was just a day, and then that window continues to shorten until we realize, like, because ultimately every time something happens, you recognize that it was happening for a reason, that it was an opportunity for you to get in contact with that part of you that wants to speak, when that angry reactive part, whatever it is, whatever the situation triggers, whatever part of you it kind of wakes up and brings to the fore, is a part that wants to express itself. It wants to come back into wholeness within yourself. So then when you start to see that, you see it enough times, and you respond rather than react, or at least move in the direction of responding rather than reacting more and more, and that gap closes. You start to recognize that it's always working for you, and that everything, even the upsetting neighbor, the unfair treatment from the boss, like, everything is actually an opportunity to bring a part of you back into wholeness, which is like so crazy. We talked earlier in the episode about pattern recognition. And you recognize that that pattern is always ongoing in life, and that life is actually working with you in order to mirror everything that's out of alignment within yourself, it's working with you to mirror that so that you can see it and bring it back into alignment, it goes like, wow, this is an insane, like insanely beautiful game that we're playing here. And I don't have to take anything personally. Like I don't have to get reactive, because I know that even if it is this, like, from the egoic perspective, this very upsetting and unfair situation, we know, when we understand karma and we spend enough time sitting and meditating on karma, that it's all happening for a reason, and that it's actually happening for us, not to us, and it's an opportunity for us to grow, which is so cool. And the more you relax into the awareness of that being the truth, the more clear it becomes, and then the lighter everything gets. And then it's funny, kind of paradoxically, those triggers start to become less. But it's like, it's not really paradoxical. It makes perfect sense. It just seems that way at the start, but it makes perfect sense because we're actually lightening up that load inside. We are coming back into alignment, so there's no need for life to magnetize these upsetting, triggering experiences to us, because there's nothing left to trigger in there. Because the whole point is for us to come into alignment, because it is all one. So it's like, man, it's far out when we start to kind of sit in the awareness of that, and then see that experience confirm that awareness, and then it just deepens and deepens.
Folks, if you like what you heard on episode 41 of Oneself, please do all the things that are free that help us out, like, comment, share, subscribe. We really appreciate it. We really do. And if you got anything out of this conversation, um, we're glad. We really appreciate that. And so yeah, folks, we will catch you next week. Adam, do you have any closing thoughts for everyone before we wrap things up?
I don't think so, man. Yeah, I mean, that was fun. Thanks for asking the questions, and allowing me the space to share a little bit more about my story. And I look forward to returning the favor.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. Yeah, folks. Yeah, today was a little bit more deeper dive into Adam. Next week, we're going to be diving into a little bit more of my life and my experiences, my journey. And so yeah, we'll hope we catch you then for next week's coming attractions. So until then, be well.